Okay, hello everyone. Good day, good evening, depending on where you are and from where you're listening to us today. Welcome to the fourth webinar in a series of webinars that the Obriel Global Observatory is organizing, dedicated to South America, Indian collaboration in the higher education and research sectors. This initiative is supported by the Obriel Global South American chapter, and also today's event specifically by our colleagues at the FAUBAI in Brazil, which is the Brazilian Association for Internationalization of Higher Education, and our Indian chapter, which is spearheaded by Symbiosis International University. We are very pleased to welcome a very interesting panel today. The focus of today's discussions will indeed be on the internationalization of research, what that means to both South America and to India. We'll have a particular look at Brazil, of course, in the context of South America. We'll talk about common priorities. We'll talk about challenges. We'll talk about programs for collaboration in research between the regions, and we'll try to generate some ideas on how this could be enhanced in the future. I have a few technical announcements for you today. First of all, we have interpretation in 3 languages today, in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. So please do select the language in which you would like to listen to this event. Second of all, we would very much encourage your questions and your comments. Please post those in the Q&A icon. If you post your comments and questions in the Q&A icon, it allows the panelists to also answer you directly in the chat, should they choose to. Otherwise, we will feed your questions into the discussion at various points in time. First of all, I would just like to say 1 or 2 very short words about Obriel Global, so you understand a little bit about who we are before introducing the panelists and kicking off the discussions. If you're joining us for the first time today, Obriel Global is an international association of universities, university associations, research institutes. It has a truly global mission. It is interested in facilitating South-South-North global dialogue in the higher education and research sectors, which is underpinned by collaborative projects that we undertake, studies, etc. As I mentioned earlier, we have several chapters which really structure our work and build the agenda from the bottom up. We have a South American chapter, a Central American chapter, a Caribbean chapter, an African chapter, a European chapter, and of course an Indian chapter. The dialogue series that this particular webinar is part of is part of our efforts to structure more concerted discussions between different important countries and regions of the so-called Global South, because we feel that oftentimes those discussions are not had, at least not directly. And so the point is to put different colleagues from different, very different regions of the world that share common priorities at the same table to talk very punctually about issues around which then our organization will then propose follow-up projects and studies and the like. So that's a bit the context of today. I would like to now turn to our panel. We have a 2-part panel for you today. The first part of this panel is going to look more at the general framework of research cooperation between South America and India. We'll have, again, a particular spotlight on Brazil. The idea is to look at the current policies, the current priorities, how research is structured, how research collaboration is structured, whether there is a space for South-South cooperation, whether there are pre-existing collaborations between India and South America and Brazil in particular, etc. From there, we'll go to a second part of the panel where we'll be looking more particularly at examples of collaborations and programs. We'll look at some particular institutional strategies to that effect, and we'll have the opportunity to think about how we might strengthen those relationships. On the first part of the panel today, I'm very pleased to welcome Professor Marcelo Noble, who is the former president of the State University of Campinas in Brazil. Also joining us on this first part of the panel today will be Dr. Ketan Kotecha, who is the director at the Symbiosis Institute of Technology, CU in India. He's jumping in today for Dr. Adrashit Goswami, who has not been able to join us, may come in later, but Dr. Kotecha has kindly offered to weigh in on some of the first questions that will be asked in the first part of the panel, and then he'll stay on for the second part as well. So very welcome to both of you. I should also mention that we have with us today Dr. Jose Celso Freire, who's the Chief Advisor for External Relations at the State University of Sao Paulo in Brazil, and he will be coming in the second part of the panel. So let's get right into it then. I have a series of questions for the colleagues today. I would encourage you to keep your responses fairly brief, 5 minutes or so. And as we go, if there are questions that pop up in the question and answer section, we will probably feed those in. So let's start then with Dr. Noble. Brazil is a leading research country in Latin America in terms of performance. Brazil is also a very big country with a tremendous diversity of higher education institutions and research capacity. Could you please say something about the state of play of research in Brazilian universities and how Brazil is promoting the internationalization of research in particular from the perspective of the universities?
Okay, thank you. Bom dia, buenos dias. I will turn to Portuguese so that we use the interpreters that we have here. Bom, eu queria agradecer o convite por estar aqui hoje.
I wanted to thank the invitation and this possibility of participating.
Do desenvolvimento da internacionalização nesses momentos que a gente está vivendo. Eu, no momento, estou.
We are right now living a reality in terms of internationalization. Here, I'm located in Boston in the United States, so it's 8 a.m. in the morning almost. I know that Dr. Kotecha, that is in India, is in the evening, so we are living on this. And I think that the question you were asking is very interesting, and it's hard to answer. Unfortunately, what's happening in Brazil and in Latin America, we have an absence of policies regarding higher education in terms of science and research and technology. So with every administration or government, we have different ideas. We have a different state policy to address this in terms of science and technology. So we serve different waves or trends, and therefore we don't have a clear policy for this. In spite of the several crises that we have faced, in spite of the moments of success and crisis, we are living in a rather serious situation in terms of science and technology, in terms of financing. But in spite of that, Brazil has been able to move forward a lot. Universities are rather new in Brazil. Those the eldest universities are 75, 80 years old. And research was born towards the end of the 80s and the 70s. And that's when we started to have masters and PhDs, but not before. And we have made a lot of progress. The infrastructure for research has grown a lot in our country. In recent years, we have trained around 25,000 PhD students every year. We have a good structure for research. We have more institutes working in research. And now that we are facing this pandemic, we had the possibility of having two institutions in our country who were able to develop vaccines very quickly. And thanks to that, some way or another, we have been able to overcome this crisis in spite of the government that we have, that is making everything that it's possible to go against science. So I think that the question you are asking is a really hard one. We have a structure for research. It's a sector that is well known and is supported, but we know that the research sector is facing a lot of dangers because financing for universities was cut. We have many scientists and academics that are leaving the country, that are running away. So we don't have resources to upgrade or improve our equipment. So we are in a critical situation right now. I would like to say that at these times, institutional relationships and relationships between countries can help us to mitigate this crisis. And I know that this crisis will come to an end. So that's just a general conclusion and a general landscape of what we are doing and what the situation that we are facing right now.
Instability, huge cuts, budgetary cuts, unstable commitments towards scientific research in Brazil. So a complicated landscape where indeed the need for institutional investment in international research collaboration is perhaps greater than it has ever been. How does that look from the Indian side? If Dr. Kotecha could weigh in on that. How is India's research structured, particularly given that you have a diverse landscape of actors, the IITs, the universities, the research centers? How is research organized in India, and could you say something about the national commitment to the internationalization of Indian research?
So, good afternoon, everyone. And the first thing is the research in India. There are multiple ways it has been delivered. If you see the IITs, which are the Indian Institute of Technologies, which are the premier institutions across the world, there's a huge amount of research output is produced by them. And there are next level of universities which are autonomous, which are National Institute of Technologies. So there's a fair amount of research coming out from them as well. However, for the other universities in general, I'm not talking about the Symbiosis University, which I'll be telling it last because we have a fantastic ecosystem for the research. But in general, the universities, other universities are facing a lot of issues as far as research output is concerned. There are multiple reasons for the same. One of the reason is massification because the population is very high. So the universities are more concentrating on educating them for their job placements and for their further growth compared to research. At the same time, fortunately in India, because there's a huge market, the undergraduate students are getting the job placements as well. And so less number of students are opting for the research. Because those who can't get the job, they only generally go for the research. This is in general. There are good students who really want to pursue the research, but in general it is no. Second issue is the government at times, look at bifurcating the different kind of universities, for example, public universities and private universities. Some of these schemes are not available for the private universities, even though the fact that the number of private universities in the countries are now very big in number. Possibly, as I know, they are higher than the number of government universities. So these are some of the challenges as well. More challenges, economical and social issues are always been there. And the most importantly, in India, unfortunately, majority of the research is coming out from the government funds and not from the industries. If in a country, Western countries particularly, if the research is coming, the research funding is coming from the industries, I think there will be a huge amount of fund available. But that is not true in general in the Indian context. One more reason of not having a good research output is, the university professors are loaded with large number of activities and not only the research. As I already mentioned, that there are good number of students, there are large classrooms, and that's what teaching is the focus. At the same time, there are a lot of constraints. A lot of agencies ask for several kinds of administrative data, and that's what I think there's a huge amount of work on the university professors along with the research. And so research is not the only criteria. Research and teaching is not the only portfolio given to them. There are a lot of other work which they are doing, and that's what the focus or time given to the research is less. Also, there is a time difference that is also an lacuna in general for the overseas kind of research. If you want to collaborate with other universities, let's say in South America, maybe this all the countries may not be good English speaking, so that is also at times we have found the differences. And obviously, as my fellow colleague has told, that Corona has again disrupted a lot of research fund, and a lot of research fund which was already sanctioned was not been given to complete the project. Obvious reasons of Corona and this particular pandemic. So these are some of the issues, but however, at the same time, now the Indian government has come up with an revolutionary policy, which is national education policy. And under that, the research is bound to flourish because there are a lot of avenues getting created. And some of the schemes, research schemes have been started even before NEP implementation, like Spark funding, which is all across the globe. I'll be talking about that in my second half. But there's a Spark, a DO, and there are so many other schemes which have been started from Indian government, where there's an opportunity for any other country to collaborate with the Indian researcher, and I would say there's a very, very hefty amount is given for that particular research, and it's not that difficult to get as well. So that is the in general scenario right now.
Okay, thanks so much for creating that picture. Obviously, you share many challenges, very different political context than in Brazil, but common challenges nonetheless. Despite this landscape where you have a number of challenges, you did mention, Dr. Kotecha, that the Indian government is investing in collaborative international research. That is a bright spot. Is that being mirrored in Brazil? And I would like to come back to Dr. Noble. To what extent at the national level in Brazil is internationalization of research being promoted? Are there schema? Are there opportunities, or is it all bleak? And if it's all bleak, how are the institutions, how are the universities strategizing to compensate for that lack of support at the national level?
Então, complicado, eu não quero parecer muito pessimista, mas os momentos
Well, that's a complex question. I don't want to
exigem,
be very
né?
pessimistic,
Espera aí que
but
agora...
right now, just give me 1 second. Actually, what's going on, as a matter of fact, is that right now, we have all our projects, all our ideas, all of them related to internationalization.
Entra na discussão porque a gente está num
They are
momento
kind of something that is not even part of the conversation. It's not even part of the discussion because we are in a survival mode. That is to say, the institutions right now are more concerned about surviving these times rather than trying to find an improvement in the quality, in the internationalization or curricula changing and all the rest of the things that normally they should be doing. I mean, that they should be the concerns of their universities. So right now, this is a very complex time. I think you all know that Brazil experienced a time with great world reach with Science Without Borders. Many students traveled abroad. So that project was very interesting, very positive, but it was not duly benefited from in order to be able to establish further connections or better connections with the universities or with the rest of the research centers. That's really a pity because it was a project
de uma maneira
that maybe was conducted from a more personal point of view, and that project evolved. It was later on known as Cap Spring, which was an internationalization project in itself, led with the CAPS, which is the organization that deals with the scholarships for students who want to do postgraduate research studies. And they have an interesting idea to establish connections between universities so as to be able to conduct this kind of internationalization. But right now, they are suffering from a lot of difficulties, mainly because CAPS is undergoing a crisis, a deep crisis, with many people participating there in the universities, who actually, well, last year they were removed from the commissions. I mean, there is a very serious internal crisis. And as Elizabeth has said already, the role of the institutions, of the research institutions, is so important for internationalization purposes. We also, well, as it was said already as well, we had very interesting projects within the context of the BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, South Africa. As a matter of fact, I participated as part of a delegation from the BRICS, from the Brazilian BRICS, that went to India to talk about technology. And that was very relevant indeed. But unfortunately, it only created some kind of specific cooperations, that is to say, some project, but there's no policy, no cooperation policy as such. And I think that, I mean, we are in the right condition to create a deeper kind of cooperation. According to what's happening now with India, we can see that we have many points in common, many challenges in common as well. There are people who are important for these kind of projects. And I think we can say that from a cultural point of view, there are a lot of issues that make us be really close, our both countries. I mean, I think we could have larger projects that we thought at the beginning, some ideas of great contributions or even good practices. But I think that still, yeah, there's a lot to do, a lot ahead of us to be done. Unfortunately, it will have to be on a case-by-case basis because it's a very complex time for us here. But I hope that in the future, this relation can evolve so that we can get to have more consolidated policies in both countries.
You mentioned the Science Without Borders program, which really made a splash in its time. Was a way to put Brazil on the map in terms of being a funder of mobility of students and young researchers. But as you suggested, this program terminated and perhaps its benefits weren't fully exploited given the nature and size of the investment at the time. And the follow-up program, though it has supported Brazilian universities in their internationalization endeavors, also has a lot of difficulties. So basically, we come back to the important role of institutions now in pioneering and advocating and in moving forward with their own respective internationalization with the resources and the networks that they can find. I would like to ask now both panelists and Dr. Kotecha, feel free to weigh in on this, about where you find in this picture some interest and some hope for South collaboration. In many cases, when we talk about research collaboration, the focus generally tends to be on the North or on priorities coming from the North, on the European Horizon programs, on the US investments, on China, etc. But it's not so often that we talk really about structured research collaboration for development towards common challenges of universities and the university sector in the global South. Is this a priority at the national level in your countries? Is this a priority for universities, the need to collaborate more with institutions, for example, within Latin America, between Latin American institutions, the need to collaborate between India and Brazil, between India and Africa? So this need to build stronger research linkages between the global South, does that figure in the priorities right now? And could you maybe comment on that?
Certainly, you see, as far as research is concerned, I don't think we can go with only few select countries. I think it finally boils down to the competency of an individual, because I've seen the exchanges for the students starts from top down. The university signs a memorandum of understanding, and then finally the students are getting exchanged. But as far as research is concerned, the success depends on, suppose myself connecting to someone professor in Brazil and start some joint publications and then moving ahead. So it's generally bottom up, and that's what I don't find any difficulties. In fact, there are a lot of opportunities, and particularly our university is very focused on a lot of research tie-ups, irrespective of where the other country and professor is located at. So I see a lot of opportunities here.
Okay, so tremendous opportunities, but they tend to be driven bottom up as opposed to having the sort of top-down policy support.
Yeah, and as professor has mentioned, even myself applied for a BRICS HTI project. I was just trying to find out from my email that particular call. So that even we applied with St. Paul University in Brazil with Dr. Liang, right? So I'm still in touch with him, and we have applied for that particular project with 5 countries coming closer. So the work is already been there. It's not something which now we need to plan, because it is always bottom up.
Okay, but you did indeed benefit from a BRICS scholarship. That's interesting. Yeah, Dr. Noble, would you like to respond to that?
Eu também tenho a mesma situação. Eu também estou num projeto, a gente tem tentado colaborar.
I also have a very similar experience, because I'm cooperating in a project, and I believe this is a priority for all the countries in the South to bet on this kind of cooperation. In Brazil, for example, Latin American cooperation happens naturally, that is to say, without the need of an effective policy in place, because of the geographical proximity, that is to say, in Latin America. But in the case of India, we need to have financing resources, because everything becomes more expensive.
Absolutamente necessário, até para sobrevivência.
And we need to get closer to India. That's essential for sovereignty on the one hand, the sovereignty of the southern countries. And I believe the road ahead is what we were saying. BRICS is something very important in order to benefit from our strengths. Right now, well, you were asking whether we have this kind of policy. We don't have that, and we need it. We need the organizations such as OBREAL, FAUBAI, all the organizations that are present in this talk today and which are working in internationalization, that they will foster or that they will try to create the ground so that when the situation improves, because I repeat, there is no current dialogue, no current possibility that that happens with the current government for us. It could happen locally, maybe. For example, in my university in the state of São Paulo, there is an agency that fosters, it's called FABESTE, that can contribute. So there are other ways to try and get this kind of cooperation and then to evolve it. And that's what we are talking about a lot right now. We need to benefit from the few things that I believe that the pandemic has given us, the possibility to do things remotely, virtually and remotely, this possibility of creating exchanges or programs such as this one that allow to meet by means of Zoom, and that allow for these kind of exchanges, or even people to meet or to have these kind of global discussions remotely. Despite the different time zones, these tools have enabled all of this. So we need to make an effort, essentially, in this regard, so as to be able to conduct our own development as a country. This connection effort between Latin America, India, Africa, and many other places which have interesting things to contribute. We need to try and do this effort in order to work more effectively.
South-South-North cooperation in research in particular. I had one more question for you for this first block here of this webinar today, because it would be interesting to talk more about modalities, the how of the research cooperation. And of course, we're looking at the perspective of the university sector here today in particular. Do you believe that doctoral education or collaboration in doctoral education plays a strong role in this? Could it play a stronger role? And is it where we should focus our attentions? Because as you've stated before, there are many collaborative research projects that exist. It's very difficult to map them all. But when we start to talk about a more structured collaboration, a more structured interinstitutional collaboration, perhaps we need to look at different modalities, and doctoral education could be one of them. Is that an area where you would place priority, and do you see that already happening in your countries?
Bom, eu acho que sim. Aqui no Brasil nós
think so. Here in Brazil, we have master courses that are very solid, very strong. PhD or doctoral studies allow for an opportunity that we call the sandwich PhD. That is to say, you start the PhD studying in a different country, for example, abroad, and you can conclude, you can finish that in your origin country. So, and that has worked really well. And then, naturally, in a natural way, that evolved in different places. Mainly getting in touch with the North so that you could get a double certificate from both countries. And for someone who conducted a doctoral education, a PhD, that's something very important. I believe that this is a very important channel, a very important possibility for people who finished their PhDs and who are trying to start working to get a job. I know, for example, many Brazilians on the one hand and people from India that finished who finished their PhDs, but then it was difficult for them to actually get a job. Now, the PhD is giving them this possibility. For example, if there is a person that is highly qualified to make a joint cooperation or joint research, that's a great possibility to bet on that right now. Before I finish, I was asked to welcome the Federal University of Minas Gerais, that is a great and important university of our country, and who is present here now in our webinar. And they are working together with Obriel. It's the last member to join Obriel, as a matter of fact. So big hug to Sandra, who is the dean, and to the whole team of Minas Gerais.
The association, very warm welcome. And in fact, we could actually use this webinar to celebrate the adherence of Minas Gerais to our association. We hope, I mean, Obriel Global is one vehicle amongst many. At the very least, we try to raise on the agenda the importance of this type of dialogue, explicitly this type of dialogue, in the absence of certain state policies or in the absence of certain funding instruments. We hope that we can at least keep the connectivity between the two regions and the two continents alive. And we intend to have further interregional dialogues of this nature between South America and Africa, between the Caribbean and Africa, between India and the Caribbean, et cetera, et cetera. And we're exploring this and mapping this. So we hope that at very least modestly we can provide a forum to grow these connections, and if projects and programs and deeper collaborations can emerge from it, all the better. I'm looking at the question and answer. I don't see any questions that have come in yet. Audience members, please feel free to post your comments. We are going to move on to the second part of this panel. I would encourage Dr. Noble to stay with us as long as he likes, in case he would like to make further comments at the end. Dr. Kotecha will stay with us as well, as he had originally prepared his intervention for the second part, which is now forthcoming. Dr. Celso joins us. He's just appeared, so very welcome. Indeed, the second part of this webinar today was intended to go a little bit deeper into some of the institutional, some of the university mechanics of this cooperation in research, and to also look at some specific examples and some cases. I want to start with a question for Dr. Celso, which is similar to one of the first questions that was answered in the previous part of this webinar, but we were curious to get your take on it. You have a lot of experience in promoting internationalization in general for the Brazilian higher education sector, but also in advocating the importance of internationalization of research. What, in your opinion, are the main challenges that you have detected in promoting joint research programs, particularly when it comes to promoting joint research with other countries in the South?
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Obriel, for inviting us, Falbai, and myself representing UNESP. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, bom dia, buenos dias. Elizabeth, perhaps the biggest challenge is to reverse the tendency among researchers from these regions to prioritize partnerships with European and North American institutions. Maybe because they have developed part of their professional path in these regions of the world, most of our researchers naturally turn to institutions in these parts of the world when looking for partners. And this, for me, it's something very important. Furthermore, I believe that it's necessary to develop a joint effort to promote those partnerships as internationalization strategies in the region, a real strategy. The partnerships created by professors and researchers are an essential engine for developing collaborative research programs and projects, but educational institutions can establish top-down strategies to foster the development of partnerships with southern institutions seeking to contribute to the development of quality science. I mean, embedded in the internationalization strategies, a look to the south. And I don't know if it is present in the internationalization strategies of the most important Brazilian institutions. For that to happen, it is fundamental that a joint effort of mutual knowledge is made so that the institutions of the different countries get to know the areas of excellence that exist and that can be explored in the different possibilities of cooperation. I believe this is another very important point. We don't know each other. We don't know where are the best capabilities in each other institutions. Then people in Brazil, they know the IITs, but they don't know details about how they work and what they are doing. And I believe it is the same in the opposite side.
Okay.
Thinking ahead, I believe that we should address the issue of encouraging PhD students of today to seek to undertake part of their studies in higher education institutions of the global south. Using Marcelo's example of sandwich PhDs, for example. In the same way that today's senior researchers seek to cement partnerships in institutions in the North, using this model in the future, it will be easier for professionals who undertake their studies in the South to deepen partnerships in these regions. As with any initiative, the financial issue also needs to be addressed. Funding sources need to be identified that can ensure a perennial and stable cooperation process that can have the time to show its importance. Then 4 points that I would like to introduce to the conversation.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so I mean, basically it's about priority changing. And I think it was interesting what you said about how many of the mentors of young researchers are those that have been trained or done their studies in the global North. And as a result, that tends to be a reference point. And it's very hard to change or alter that pattern and to convince younger researchers or doctoral students about the potential importance and interest scientifically in studying in other Southern countries. In addition to that, the incentivization or the funding modalities are potentially not there. Would you, Dr. Kotecha, would you like to weigh in on that? Do you agree with those challenges from the Indian side? Does that look the same way? Or would you like to add to that?
I think I have mentioned the challenges already, and I agree with Professor that maybe we don't know each other in general. What are the capabilities, and possibly if we discuss, if we provide some forum where we can discuss research, I think there'll be a lot of common ideas and a lot of competing competencies will be there where we can join hands and do the joint research.
Okay, good. Another question now for Dr. Celso. When you listened earlier to some of the challenges that Dr. Kotecha presented regarding research careers in India and the research landscape and research policies in India, do you think that there are commonalities with some of the challenges faced in Brazil? Or would you say the countries are very distinct in terms of their international research policies and challenges?
I believe there are commonalities, but before answering, it is necessary to highlight the greatest diversity of institutions in the higher education scenario in Latin America, and particularly in Brazil. In Brazil, there are around 2,000 higher education institutions. Of these, approximately 200 are universities. University is a very special term in Brazil. To be a university, we need to do research, with education for sure, and cooperate with society. But then there are only 200 universities, about 200 universities. Research in the country is mainly done in universities and mostly in public ones. This is another important factor. But it is also essential to clarify that there are private institutions for profit or not, where some research activities are also carried out, but most of the research is done in public universities. In this context, therefore, it is essential to emphasize the importance of the role of public universities in the development of international research cooperation. Then, when we talk about international research corporations, we are talking about corporations with public universities in Brazil, mostly. Consequently, it is in this context that I will answer the question. In the previous answer, I mentioned some of the challenges we must face to encourage cooperation between higher education institutions from the global south. I will now show some ideas that I believe can improve and foster this interaction. And I will just mention some of the programs that we had in the past, as mentioned by Marcelo. But some data before. According to data from the Scopus database from 2016 to 2020, around 200,000 scientific articles were produced in Brazil with researchers from all over the world as co-authors. Of those, more than 70% had co-authors from institutions in North America and Europe. Less than 10% were published with co-authors from African institutions, and even less, around 3.7% with researchers from South American institutions. Therefore, these figures showed that much more should be done to foster researcher cooperation between institutions in the global south, from the Brazilian point of view. A closer look at India and South Africa shows one side of the potential to be explored. And pay attention to the numbers. In the same period, from 2016 to 2020, researchers from Brazil and India have published together 5,430 articles, with Brazil's individual field weight citation impact being 0.92 and India's 0.87. But the joint publication reads 5.32. A similar analysis focusing on South Africa indicates a South African field weight citation impact of 1.25, bigger than Brazilian and Indian, with a joint publication with Brazil of 3,369 articles, but with a field weight citation impact of 6.33. These numbers show that together we are much more robust and can offer better solutions of humanity's problems. Now, just mention some of the initiatives that we had in the past, and we can think about starting again. Among them, it's worth mentioning the support program for trilateral scientific and technological cooperation. We call IBAS here in Brazil, between India, Brazil, and South Africa. It was created in 2005, intending to support cooperation activities in science and technology that could contribute to the scientific and technological development of the three countries. Only 2 calls were launched, one in 2009 and another in 2013. Another initiative is the Strategic Cooperation Program with the Global South. Among the program's objectives, one can mention expanding scientific knowledge through collaboration with the Global South, stimulating the formation of sustainable research networks, and the PhD programs could be part of those networks, and improving the quality of academic production linked to postgraduate studies. Then again, the PhD programs. A call for proposals for these programs was launched in 2019 and had 10 partnerships selected. The second, launched in 2020, has not yet had its result published. The third one and last that I want to highlight is the BRIC University Network. And I was very enthusiastic about this program, and I believe that Marcelo, the mission to India he mentioned, I am not sure, but I believe it was in the context of this BRICS University Network. It was launched in 2015 by Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. The idea was to arrive at a networked university in which a PhD program could be done. For example, part in Brazil, part in Russia, part in India. 6 proposals were selected, but unfortunately, at my knowledge, the project was discontinued. Then just to close, if the numbers of the impact of joint publications show the enormous potential to be explored, the difficulty in ensuring funds, the continuity of initiatives launched in their perpetuation show that much still needs to be done. Thus, I hope that this event could open doors to a new and fruitful period of cooperation between institutions and the global south.
Thank you so much, Celso. You make a very provocative argument. Thank you for putting the numbers on the table. I think that sometimes is something that we're missing. We have to make our arguments with some quantitative data. Obviously, the Scopus data doesn't give the whole picture regarding university collaboration, but it's at least an indicator that can speak on some level to some audience. And I think it's important to publicize that data because we do all need to make the case for the why of this South-South collaboration. And interesting, you mentioned the 3 initiatives, the India, Brazil, South Africa initiative, the strategic cooperation with the Global South and the BRICS Universities Network. It would be very interesting to know if there has been some sort of impact study done of those initiatives, if they just fizzled, or if there has been some lasting collaborations or contacts that have resulted from the few projects financed by those initiatives. Because indeed, this whole idea of Global South and South-South collaboration is not entirely new. I mean, we saw a big push for it with the BRICS, and then it sort of fizzled, and then we've seen a few initiatives since, but it's not consistent, as you've said. And I think the question is why? You know, have we studied enough what these programs brought, how they were successful and how they failed, for example? Or is it pure political will that has broken down? I don't know, but it would be, I think it's important to look back on these programs you've mentioned amongst potentially several programs that could be examined. So thank you for that. I want to come back now to Dr. Kotecha, back to India. You come specifically from CU, which is a very strong research institution with a very strong internationalization agenda. You have had a lot of personal experience in international research collaboration. Could you tell us a bit more about your institution's approach towards promoting joint actions with other universities in the field of collaborative international research, how doctoral education fits into this, and how that's really played out at the level of your own institution?
Yeah, so very, very important question, and it's very close to my heart because what we have done in the university, we have done a great change in spite of all the difficulties I have mentioned in the first portion, which was in general for India, but we have tried to overcome, I think, most of them, if not all of them, and we have come up with a great research output in the university. And I think in last 3 years, it has jumped to multi-folds. It's not only 2 times or 3 times. I think it's an exponential growth. I would tell there are multiple reasons out of that. I will just try to explain them in a sequence what we have done. First thing is, as an university, we have created an, I think, culture of the research, right? So research culture includes, if you remember, I told about the challenges the Indian professors are facing, which is a lot of different activities and diverse activities they do. But what we have done in our institution is we have given purely administrative this kind of task to some other staff members and not the faculty members, which in Indian context is very important because otherwise they end up with a lot of different activities. Then we facilitate the university professors in Symbiosis International University by various schemes. the first and foremost which we have started is we started giving research support fund to each and every faculty member. And that's a very handsome amount and a huge budget is allocated for that, whereby the faculty member, if they want to do, it's like a seed money, if they want to do a small experimentation, if they want to do publication in a journal where there are article processing charges to start with, they can utilize for that. And the powers have been given to utilize that fund very easily. Second, we have built up an infrastructure for the research. For example, I myself do the research in artificial intelligence, and the GPU is the bare minimum requirement. So it's almost in no time, without asking much details, we have been given that as well. So likewise, research infrastructure have been created across the university in different areas, not only in artificial intelligence. The library facility has been uplifted, all journals, all the required research articles have been made available to all the faculties online and offline. Not only giving these research support fund, but we also started giving the incentives to the faculty members who publish in a very good high quality for A-star journals. Right, so that's also over and above other facilities, right? So they get their compensation in terms of salary, they get research infrastructure, whatever they want, they got research support fund, and after that, if they publish, then again additional incentives have been given to them, and they are also very lucrative. We also started with giving the young researchers the support in terms of minor research project and major research project, whereby the funding comes again from the internal resources from the Symbiosis University. We also gave special leaves. Suppose if I go on a project to Brazil, I'll get a special leave, which will be additional leaves compared to whatever I get the leaves. Right. We also started research centers in various upcoming and leading cutting edge technology areas like artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, waste resource management, and so on and so forth. Over and above this, if the faculty member finds out something unique and he wants to file a patent, we have also established internal patent cell. The cell helps the researcher to file and publish the patent, and entire the charges have been also borne by the university. Now we are also planning to recruit copy editors to facilitate the researchers to write, and publish faster, right? So these are some of the facilities we have created. Once we create this facility, what I have noticed, particularly in my institute at Symbiosis Institute of Technology, and is an engineering institute, is we could attract a good researchers as in faculty members from other universities. Because I must say that ranking of the university can attract good students, but if you provide a very, very good environment, and particularly for the research, I think you can invite a good researchers to your institutions from nearby institutions. So we got a new turn there, whereby a large number of good researchers have started joining us. They were already there, and the good numbers have joined as well. So that is attracted, and that is, I think, multifold effect of the research was because of that. After after giving all this, and rather due to all this, our faculty members have built their profile. They published large number of research papers. I would say in numbers, it has become 5 times in last 2 years compared to what we were doing before. And then because the faculty members have now made the profile, which is highly required before they start with the international collaboration, so their brand has been established. And then they started looking for the collaborations. And as I mentioned earlier also, the collaborations generally in research is successful, which is bottom up. I contact a faculty member in Brazil, and if he's interested, if the area matches, then there can be MOU signing if required, and then it goes on. Unlike the students' collaborations with university signs an MOU, and then finally students exchange happens. So after these faculty members have built their profile, they started looking for the collaborations, where we have an established in our university. We have an international relation office. There is a huge pool of members there. And we have divided the work there. There are people who look after collaborations from Europe. There are people who look after the collaborations from other countries as well, and they facilitate us and they connect us to the different parts of the world based on our requirements. So that's an, I think, very, very unique being in Symbiosis International University. Our name tag only contains the international word, and that's what we have a very, very dedicated international relations cell for at the central level in the university. And they also have a licensing officer in each and every institute of the university. So it's a very, very big team, which helps us in building the network after the faculty members have built up their profile. Then also we have started a scholars in residence program, whereby we invite the very high profile scholars to our universities, and we pay a very lump sum and rather a very handsome amount for that particular assignment. We started also applying, there are various grants, particularly exploratory grants, whereby you can go and visit to some of the universities abroad, and then you can start collaborating. Even myself has went for several such collaborations, like in UK and other countries as well, under these different grants, which are exploratory in nature. We also started organizing joint workshops, and nowadays it's very easy to have it in online mode as well with foreign universities abroad, and also joint conferences as well, right? We also started exchanging the PhD students. So all these things, lead to a good collaboration with the foreign universities abroad. So once we get a connect from this, we are on the runway, in the sense after that, the first goal we tied up was to have a joint publication with these faculty members abroad. So large number of faculty members have published their papers in collaboration with the universities abroad, the professors there, and that, I think, builds the trust. So we generally don't start with the, if there is a funding call, then we contact the professors. We generally don't do that at our institute. What we do is, it's an ongoing process. Like faculty members are now thorough in the research. They have joint publications with the professors abroad. The next step we do is we invite that professor as a joint PhD supervisor with the faculty member where he is working. And that's, we have a very, very conducive environment, which it's very easy to make somebody a co-supervisor for a PhD student, which is registered with our university. So the work is on with the professor. And then now there's a takeoff phase, whereby if there is a funding call, okay, there are a lot of funding calls, in fact, nowadays, and we find the best one out of it, which is most suited to the competencies of both the professors, and then they apply for the funding. While doing that, it is also highly expected. And what we do is, within our university also, we collaborate with other institutions, because generally the funding call is multidisciplinary. It's application of something in a very, very broader perspective. Generally, it is always a global problem which is needs to be solved. And that's what we, within the university, we collaborate, and then also the outside university in the across the world. While doing that, again, in our university, we have a very important support cell, which we call as Symbiosis Center for Research and Innovation, whereby they help us in applying for the funding, for the budget, and for several other procedures which are required for apply for the funding, the approvals. So there's a dedicated cell again in the university which helps us that. Right. Once the project is applied and the funding is granted, obviously all kinds of leaves, as I mentioned, that is given from the university. The next step after the funding is through, let's say one funding is through, the success builds the success. What we do is the same funding, same rather area we extend for a consortia project. I already mentioned that I already myself applied for a BRICS STI project 2020, in fact, and that was related to Corona with University, Saint Paul University here in Brazil with Dr. Liang, right? So that kind of consortia project also brings more and more networking, because that's the next level of this particular of funding. There can be further enhancement which we have not done, but we are now planning. Is MTech by research. We are starting a program which is called postgraduate in engineering, and that is by research. So what we are planning is, it's kind of a mini research program or mini PhD program, whereby we'll be sending the students abroad, and with the professor he will work, and finally both the professor will come closer, and again they will apply for some kind of funding. I wish that there can be some forums also between two countries or between two continents, whereby we can discuss the common research areas, which I found they are very less right now. For example, what I'm telling is my university professors are working in some particular area, so I find out the 5 best areas where I'm working. Maybe some other universities in Brazil or maybe South America can also come forward, find out the 5 different areas, and likewise maybe there can be 25 to 50 such universities on one particular website, giving the strength of the research. I'm sure it will really help in enhancing the further research. So in short, if I just summarize, research starts with making the competencies of the faculty member, creating an ecosystem, creating a culture of that. After the faculty competencies, a dedicated cell like Symbiosis Center for, or rather Symbiosis International Cell, which connects us to the outside world. And while applying, again there is a dedicated center which is research cell, which helps us in applying and doing all kind of admin work for us, really helps in this kind of scenario. And particularly the university like us, which gives a lot of funding, a lot of incentives, I'm sure the sky is the limit, right? And that's the reason I think we have increased the research output multifolds, and we have been placed very highly ranked in the across the country. Out of around 1,050 universities of our country, we are in first 40, right? So that's a very, very, and because research is the most important parameter in that ranking, and we are in the first 40 universities across the country, which also includes maybe several IITs and other institutions. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. A very interesting case study, a very impressive case study of what Symbiosis is doing. Obviously, you have the luxury of being able to dedicate some own resources and internal funding towards this, but the fact that you've designed such a strong ecosystem for supporting young researchers and providing them with opportunities and supporting faculty and providing them with training and also guaranteeing that international articulation and outreach is, I think it shows that resources are not the only part of the picture. You need to have a strong institutional system design to really then achieve the goals. So congratulations on that example. I want to now sort of round this all together with a final question, and also allow Celso to react to some of the initiatives that you mentioned. The topic today is about India, Brazil, or India, Latin America collaboration. The topic more generally is about South-South collaboration in research in particular. Given some of the examples you've mentioned and also some of the programs that have been discussed in this webinar today, how do you think institutions in India and in Brazil, for example, can promote a more structured and sustainable approach to research collaboration? What should the modalities be? How should it start? Dr. Kotecha already mentioned the importance of maybe having very dedicated platforms between two countries, for example, where you can match research strengths and interests and needs also on a disciplinary level. What else can be done? And what would be your recommendations towards our audience and towards the wider policy-making community going forward? Maybe we'll start with Celso.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Before, I just would like to comment about one important point that you pointed out. that is about an institutional evaluation of programs in Brazil. We are not familiar, the CAPES and PQ, or they don't do that kind of evaluation. And this is a big problem. At the beginning, Marcelo mentioned the science without borders. That is a word known. Everybody know about the science without borders. But in Brazil, there are a lot of people say that it is not available program for Brazil because there's no study. There never an agency like in Europe, for example, that you did with the Erasmus Plus. They never did that in Brazil. Then just to let you know, at FAUBAI, we produced a book about the science without borders, and we just published 2-3 months ago with people that participated, but not only from Brazil, but with partners from partner countries. Then we tried to do an evaluation about the program. And this is very important. I believe we should do that to say if this program is good or not. Then this is one point that I would like to stress. Another one, if I consider the Dr. Kotecha examples, I should go back to Marcelo's first intervention. There are a big problem in Brazil about support to science. The government is trying, in my opinion, to destroy all the scientific knowledge, all the scientific institutions that we have in Brazil. This is a project to put it down. Point. Then when we talk about money, we should consider that we will have money up in 2023 with the new government that I hope will be in place. But Marcelo and I, we are in a kind of island in Brazil, because in São Paulo we have FAPESP, and FAPESP applies every year about $400 million in research, to support research, but only for institutions in the state of São Paulo. Then in São Paulo, we can do things, but it is not true for the other states in the country. But all the examples that Dr. Kotecha mentioned, we have funding in the state of São Paulo to do that. And considering the examples that I mentioned in my previous intervention, we had in the past money to do almost the same kind of activities. But specifically to answer this question, I would like to mention an initiative that we are developing at UNESP, my university, with funding from the CAP Spring program. As mentioned also by Marcelo, we are waiting for the new calls. We are just in a waiting time. We hope we will have new calls for the next year. But in our strategy, we developed what we call global research alliances. This strategic initiative within the internationalization project of UNESP, and this is important because it is part of the internationalization strategy, involves the construction of cooperation platforms. Then we would like to create platforms of cooperation in teams in which the university develops science of excellence. The proposal was that the platform that would be established could be used for international fundraising, for development of joint research, for an interaction with local communities from a global perspective, but also for the training of doctoral students from the partner institutions, either through the offering of joint courses or from exchange programs in which students from the alliance members institutions could participate. Following a call launched in 2019, we have established 7 global research alliances with 33 world-class higher education institutions from all world regions, including Latin America, Africa, and Oceania. These alliances connected 449 researchers from around the world, with 180 from UNESP and 269 internationally. The attribute of this initiative is that I want to highlight It is its institutional character. Dozens of meetings were held with senior administrators of the partner institutions, people responsible for internationalization, for research, for postgraduate, for example, agreed to establish symmetrical and co-financed international partnerships. And this time of cooperation is perhaps, at least from a Brazilian point of view, the significant differential of the alliances. In Brazil, we are very familiar with North institutions that just came to recruit students to have students applying for, but it's rare to have institutions that look at Brazilian institutions as real partners, and this is something that we should change. Then I believe that a similar initiative could be developed within OBREL. A call could be made, for example, to establish global south research alliances in areas identified and indicated by universities from Brazil and India, with an opening to institutions from the global south or even from the north. Joint PhD programs that were mentioned several times by my colleagues, initially based on virtual research workshops and courses, could be established as the first actions of these alliances, facilitating mutual knowledge among students and researchers for future mobility, for which funding could be set, for sure. Indeed, other possibilities can be explored, but the initial results we are obtaining with our alliances, with the UNESCO alliances, show that this initiative deserves special attention. Then I just would like to give this, to leave this idea about creating those global South research alliances.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Celso. You've definitely given us some food for thought for OBREAL. I think this notion of the Global Research Alliance that's institutionally driven is very promising. You know, in Europe, we have an initiative from the European Commission to fund European university alliances. But I think there is a realization now that those alliances, while they're consolidating themselves, have to have an internationality, a global dimension as well. And particularly now, the European Union is putting a lot of emphasis on Africa, for example, and a lot of ideas are being explored around to what extent those alliances can be expanded. I think in OBREAL, we need to provide this advocacy role in addition to supporting these types of alliances and partnerships. And I hope we can continue to explore that idea together with FAUBAI and with the other Brazilian and Indian members of the association. Dr. Kotecha, would you like to leave us with any last thoughts on what we can actually do together to take forward this cooperation, specifically between Brazil and India, but also more widely in terms of the South-South collaboration in research?
Yeah, I think my colleague already mentioned, but I'll just emphasize on two things. First is, I think we believe in a pilot project. So there should be a pilot project maybe done by OBREAL and find out, let's say, 10 best universities of India who are very proactive in joining hands, and maybe similar in Brazil or maybe South-South. And then have a first online platform like this where they can put forward their ideas and research and they come closer first. And then second part can be, exchanging, or rather delegation of researchers from India should visit there, and then vice versa. Because ultimately, the deal is clinched if there is a physical handshake. Generally online, that kind of trust building is not that easy. So I think once they see that the delegation, both the sides, I think they will come closer. So, and then that's a pilot project. Once it is successful, I'm sure several others will come forward there. And I would like also that let us not be dependent on maybe different kinds of funding if you want to start. I'm sure in India, the university like us and other, maybe you will be able to find some others who will be self-funding this kind of activities as well, and maybe in Brazil. So let's start that way, I think. in place of waiting the government to do something, and because government is right now busy, I think, in combating corona and pandemic and all. So again, the time will fly, and again we'll to have this kind of workshop to have a ignition from the both sides. But I'm sure our university is always ready for that, and again there'll be many more in India. So let us start doing that without waiting for anyone. Prove ourselves that okay, the work, it has been done, the collaboration have been started, and then I'm sure everyone will follow. That should be the spirit, I think.
Excellent. Thank you so much for those comments. And I wholeheartedly concur that we need to start somewhere, even if we don't have the funding in place, even if we haven't won a project, we need to start somewhere to at least keep this on the agenda. And then if we can eventually attract funding, all the better. That can help us to build it and upscale it. But we at least need to set modest ambitions for ourselves to keep the cooperation alive and active. Otherwise, it fades entirely. And I like your approach to outlining potential steps, starting, and Celso also mentioned this, starting first with, virtual exchanges, potentially trying to build in visits, then a pilot project, et cetera, et cetera. We've been trying in Obriel Global to drive forward a number of self-funded projects between our chapters. These have to be modest projects, obviously. Given the virtual space we have now to collaborate, it's allowed us to dynamize this. But I think it is very important that we drive our own agendas and that we don't sit back and wait for the governments to give us the money to allow us to do it. And the case of Brazil is a glaring example, because both of panelists today have highlighted how turbulent it's been politically in Brazil. So we've come to the end. I would like to give a very warm thank you to both panelists, for all three panelists, to Dr. Noble as well, who's with us, for their excellent interventions. We have recorded this. We would like to be able to disseminate this recording more widely. I think there's some very important points that were made here that we will certainly take up in the Obriel Global agenda. Again, a hearty welcome to Minas Gerais, who's just joined the association. Very warm thanks and expression of gratitude to FAUBAI and to Symbiosis, who have been the drivers behind this webinar series that we've been fortunate to do. I would like to advertise two important forthcoming conferences. Reserve the month of April, because this can be an India-Brazil month for you. We have the FAUBAI conference, which is announced for Sao Paulo between April 25th and 27th. And prior to that, you will have an opportunity to go to Pune, India, for the IHE, the Internationalization of Higher Education conference that Symbiosis hosts every year. This will be between the 14th and the 16th. So we hope we will be in a condition to travel easily at that point in time. We don't know, but colleagues have told me in particular for both events, there will also be some possibilities to participate in a hybrid manner. So thank you very much to everyone. It was a real pleasure. Thank you on behalf of the whole Obriel Global team. And for the colleagues in the audience, we will make the recording directly available to you. One of you asked for the contact information of our panelists. If our panelists agree, we will provide that so that you can continue to exchange. Thank you to everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon, evening, wherever you are. And we look forward to the next round of global interregional dialogues, which we will be announcing shortly. Thanks so much, colleagues.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.